I accidentally got a boyfriend by dialing the wrong number. When I called David Miller, I dialed the wrong number. After the call was connected, I absent-mindedly called out Dad. There was a 2-second silence on the other end, and then he laughed and said, "I'm not that old. You can call me brother." And then, not long after, he became my boyfriend. I was heartbroken. After a year of wholehearted dedication in our relationship, it turned out that he had cheated on me like a player. I couldn't swallow this humiliation, and I didn't want to entangle with this scumbag anymore. So, on the night of my breakup, I got dead drunk in a small restaurant. 1 glass of white wine and 5 bottles of beer were my limit. Wiping the tears from my face, I staggered to pay the bill. Finally, when I managed to hold my phone steady and scan the QR code, the phone screen flashed and then it shut down. There were no power banks or Apple chargers in the small restaurant. So, I had to call David for help. Borrowing the landlady's phone, I silently recited David's phone number in my mind and then dialed it. Beep. The phone rang twice and then was answered. "Dad!" I called out in a shrill voice. Just as I was about to pour out my bad luck, the other side was silent for a moment and then suddenly smiled softly and said, "I'm not that old. You can call me brother." Brother? I held the phone and was stunned for a long time. It took my alcohol-numbed brain a while to figure it out. I had dialed the wrong number. I apologized in a low voice and quickly hung up the phone. After silently repeating the phone number twice, I dialed it again. A few seconds later, that smiling voice, which was quite clear and pleasant, rang in my ear again. "Little girl, did you dial the wrong number again?" Holding the phone, I was silent for a long time. Then I choked with sobs and said, "I can't remember my dad's phone number." The other side seemed to smile, and then asked in a low voice, "Then what's your mom's phone number?" "I don't have a mom." I choked even more. It was true that I didn't have a mom. When I was 5 years old, my mom left me with another man and disappeared without a trace ever since. The other side was silent for a moment and then asked in a low voice, "Are you from in city?" I quickly nodded and said, "Yes." "Which district?" I obediently replied, "High Tech Zone." "Address." My head was so dizzy that I handed the phone to the landlady. After the landlady reported the address, she handed the phone back to me. I took it blankly, and that clear voice rang in my ear again, "You're lucky. I'm just having a meal nearby." After that, he continued, "Wait for me a moment, little girl. I'll be there soon." Then the call was hung up. I stared at the phone with blurry, drunken eyes for a long time. Then I whispered, "You're the little girl. Look at my chest. It's not small at all." I returned the phone to the landlady and squatted at the restaurant door, resting my chin on my hand, waiting. Maybe because I had drunk and then caught the cold wind, my head became even more dizzy. I leaned against the glass door and almost fell asleep several times until after a long time, someone walked up to me and said with a smile, "Little girl?" I raised my head groggily and saw a boy standing in front of me, with his hands on his knees, bending over to look at me. After being dazed for a few seconds, I realized and said, "You're the one who pretended to be my dad?" He seemed to be stunned for a moment and then said, half crying and half laughing, "Let's say so." Then he asked, "Have you settled the bill?" I shook my head. "No, my phone is off." This guy was pretty straightforward. He went straight to the counter and paid my bill, then turned around and walked over to me. After giving me a once-over, he suddenly smiled. "Based on your voice, I thought you were a minor." I straightened my chest to argue my innocence. "I'm not small." A snicker came from behind me. I frowned and turned to look, only then realizing that Ryan wasn't alone. Several of his buddies were standing at the store entrance. They were all grinning at me now. The breeze blew, instantly clearing much of the alcohol haze. My face flushed, and I instinctively covered my chest with my hands, stammering, I meant my age." "Yeah." Ryan chuckled in agreement, walked over to me, and draped his jacket over my shoulders. "Come on, I'll walk you home." I pulled the jacket tighter around me and followed them a few steps before hearing his friends call out something like "sis." Before I could react, Ryan laughed and shot back, "Get lost. Can't you tell? She's a kid." Not backing down, I puffed out my chest, and he glanced at me before correcting himself with a grin. No, she's a grown girl. Nodding contentedly in my drunken stupor, I didn't even notice how he'd just taken a little advantage with that grown girl comment. Drunk people's guard really drops to nothing. As night fell, I actually went off with a group of strange guys just like that. Luckily, the diner was near my house, only a 10-minute walk away. But even in those 10 minutes, I managed a minor mishap. I'm no heavyweight when it comes to booze, and tonight I definitely hit my limit. Despite trying hard to walk straight, I was wobbling all over the place. Then, I accidentally tumbled into the roadside bushes and twisted my ankle. Ryan hurriedly pulled me out, crouched down, and examined my swollen ankle with a look of exasperation, his brow furrowed as he clicked his tongue. Following his gaze, I saw how badly swollen it was. Walking was out of the question. Any pressure on my right foot sent sharp pain shooting through me. I rubbed my ankle, breaking into a cold sweat from the agony. Suddenly, the light dimmed in front of me. Ryan crouched down, blocking some of the street lamp's glow, and his voice came through, just as pleasant as it had sounded on the phone. "Climb on my back. I'll carry you." Before I could respond, he sighed again, seriously, such a kid, tumbling into flower bushes while walking. Maybe it was the booze. Under the streetlight, despite the surrounding noise, I could hear my own heart pounding, thump, thump. I swallowed hard. This scene felt straight out of a drama, getting drunk and stumbling into your soulmate, with sweet romance finally coming my way. Barely holding back my fluttering heart, I pretended to be bashful and agreed, then shamelessly threw myself at his back. And then, I landed face first on the ground. A soft chuckle came from above me, quickly stifled, then warmth spread over my wrist as someone carefully helped me up. Ryan looked down at me, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Next time, don't go out drinking alone. Especially at night, it's dangerous." His buddies nearby laughed without mercy. "Quit it, man, you're the dangerous one." Ryan shot them a glare before crouching down in front of me again and patting his shoulder, signaling me to hop on. With liquid courage coursing through me, I climbed on without hesitation. As he lifted me up, he let out a surprised huh? And started walking forward. "For someone so tiny and slim, you're surprisingly heavy." It made me feel awkward, and not wanting to admit I was chubby, I muttered back drunkenly, "Probably because I've got a good figure." Pfft. Ryan had no real reaction, but his buddies burst out laughing. I ignored them, focusing instead on giving Ryan directions while perched on his back. Turn left, right, another right. 10 minutes later, we all stared blankly at the dead-end alley ahead. Gazing into the dark, creepy street, I slurred out, "My bad." "Maybe." "Left?" Ryan rubbed his temples. First, he carried me out of the alley, then asked, "Just tell me your apartment complex's name. I'll find it myself." I frowned and tried to think, but when I'm drunk, my biggest flaws come out, IQ plummeting and memory completely shot. After thinking for a long time, I pursed my lips. "I can't remember." Ryan seemed a bit helpless. "I'm quite familiar with this area. Try to recall a bit. If you can think of 2 words, I can still find it." So, I lay on his shoulder and tried hard to recall. Really, I remembered 2 words, garden. Ryan really seemed helpless. Beside him, his good buddy kept laughing instead, folding his arms and watching the show. Ryan took one hand to rub the space between his eyebrows. "Girl, there's Jinjiang Garden, Qinghua Garden, and Shidi Garden here. Which garden does your family live in?" My head was aching terribly. Especially after being confused by his gardens, I felt even more nauseous in my chest. As soon as I opened my mouth, I couldn't hold it back anymore and vomited directly on him. Ugh. Time seemed to stand still. I lay on his shoulder in a daze, only hearing his exclamation beside my ear. After vomiting, I felt a bit better physically, but my head still ached terribly. In a daze, I had no thinking ability at all. So, I tilted my head and fell asleep leaning against him. When I woke up again, I found myself in the police station. After a hangover, my head hurt badly. I sat up, rubbing the space between my eyebrows and looking around. Only then did I realize that I was lying on the sofa in David's office. David is a police officer at the deputy director level and has his own office. At this moment, David was sitting at the desk chatting with someone. A short-haired man was sitting opposite him with his back to me, so I couldn't see his face. Lily. I called out weakly, really feeling a bit guilty. After a hangover and staying out all night, I didn't even know how I ended up in his office out of the blue. David would surely skin me alive. Hearing my voice, David turned to look at me. Sure enough, the smile that had been on his face disappeared the moment he saw me. With a straight face, he scolded me in a cold voice, "What a mess. If it weren't for Ryan yesterday, you wouldn't even know which street you'd be sleeping on." Ryan? I was stunned for 2 seconds and scratched my forehead. Who is Ryan? As soon as I finished speaking, the man in a police uniform sitting opposite David's desk slowly turned around with clear and handsome features and a faint smile on his lips. He looked quite familiar. I blinked and stared at him for a while. Finally, I realized. You're that guy who pretended to be my dad. Ryan seemed shocked by my words. He was silent for a moment and then silently retorted, "It was you who dialed the wrong number and called me dad." Then, he turned to look at David. "Deputy Director," I didn't answer to it. David nodded, but his expression seemed to become a bit strange. Something was off. I got off the sofa. The more I looked at David's expression, the more I felt something was wrong. Sure enough, seeing me coming over, David restrained his expression a bit and said with a straight face, "I have something to do and I'm going out. You two have a chat." Then, David stood up. When he passed by me, he also patted my shoulder. "Thank him properly. You vomited all over Ryan yesterday, and it was him who brought you to the police station." After saying that, David left without looking back. With a bang, the door closed heavily, isolating the two of us in the office. The atmosphere was a bit awkward. David really couldn't make his intention to make any more obvious. He might as well just tie us together with a rope. Wait. Ryan? I thought this name sounded familiar. Since last month, David had been muttering this name in my ear. And he mentioned more than once that he wanted me to get to know this well-bred boy he talked about. Yes, David was very dissatisfied with my ex-boyfriend and had long wished for me to break up with him. David said that my ex-boyfriend was not a steady person. Sure enough, a police officer's eyes are sharp. While I was lost in these thoughts, I subconsciously looked up and unexpectedly met Ryan's gaze. My heart suddenly tightened. I forced a smile and asked him in a low voice, "Last night?" He leaned back in his chair, looking up at me. "You threw up all over me last night and then fell asleep. Since I didn't know where you lived, I had no choice but to carry you to the station. I just didn't expect you to be David's daughter." As he said this, he smiled naturally, showing no sign of seeking revenge. I secretly let out a sigh of relief, then heard him ask me, "Why haven't I seen you before?" "I've been studying at a university out of town and just graduated and came back this year, so you probably haven't seen me." He nodded, looking as if he understood. "No wonder you dialed the wrong number yesterday. Our phone cards are issued uniformly by the station. David's and mine only differ by 1 digit. His is 3806 and mine is 3809. I nodded along. "I see. I'm really sorry about what happened yesterday." As I said this, I slowly shuffled towards the door, saying politely, "I'll treat you to a meal some other day as an apology." My intention was to leave first because the atmosphere was so awkward. As for the money I owed him, I thought my dad could pay it back. However, I had only taken 2 steps when someone suddenly grabbed the back of my collar. Then, I heard his voice from behind, seemingly with a hint of amusement, "Hey, little girl, you haven't paid me back the money and you haven't washed my clothes yet. Where do you think you're going? What a nuisance." I sighed secretly with my back to him, then forced a smile and turned around. I quickly took out my phone. "How much is it?" "I'll transfer it to you." However, when I pressed the phone screen, it didn't light up. I instinctively looked up at him and saw Ryan shrug slightly. "I forgot to charge your phone." I ran to the drawer of the desk and rummaged through it to find a charging cable. I plugged my phone into charge. While it was charging, I tried hard to recall what had happened last night, and the more I thought about it, the more shocked I became. I quickly glanced at him. Did I really throw up on you last night? Ryan nodded. Absolutely. I'm so sorry. Where's the clothes? I'll wash them for you. My face turned red. Just thinking about throwing up all over him on our first meeting last night, I wished I could find a hole to crawl into. No need. Ryan sat back down on the chair beside him, looking at me half smiling. I threw the clothes away. Aw. I was stunned for a moment. Then I'll compensate you for the cost. No need to compensate. You're at most half to blame. I frowned, not quite understanding what he meant. Then I heard his explanation, because I also threw up. Everything was so dramatic that I felt extremely awkward throughout. I actually thought sweet love was coming my way yesterday. How stupid of me, a just heartbroken girl, to think about such things. This is not sweet love at all. It's just an embarrassing social death. Since my phone was charging and I couldn't leave for the moment, I looked at him politely and subtly and said, "My phone hasn't turned on yet. How about we exchange contact information? I'll transfer the money to you later." Sure. Ryan agreed readily. Then he grabbed a piece of paper on the table and scribbled down a string of phone numbers. This is my phone number, which is also my WeChat ID. I took the note and heard him remind me, "Don't lose it, little girl." After saying that, he waved at me and walked out of the office. I only let out a sigh of relief when the door closed. I tightened my grip on the note and glanced at it. Wow. Just for leaving a phone number, this guy even signed his name at the end, 2 flamboyant characters, Ryan. At 5 p.m. That afternoon, I was at home organizing my resume when I suddenly received a call from my dad. "Lily, get dressed up. I'll take you out for dinner tonight." I rubbed my temples and sighed. "I'm not going. I'm preparing my resume. We're having grilled lamb chops tonight." I stood up. "Okay, wait for me. I'll be ready soon." "Wait!" David exclaimed anxiously. "It's an important occasion tonight. Dress up nicely." "Yes, sir." After hanging up the phone, Lily frowned. What kind of important occasion would involve having grilled lamb chops? Well, whatever. As long as there's food. So, an hour later, Lily showed up in full regalia at a well-known halal restaurant in the city. Following David's instructions, she went to the first private room on the second floor. The moment she pushed open the door, both Lily and the people in the room were stunned. This was the important occasion David had mentioned, a bunch of young guys in their 20s, sitting in the private room, all wearing vests, shorts, and flip-flops, exuding a strong sense of masculinity. Lily thought she had entered the wrong room and subconsciously stepped back to check. It was room 201, right? When she reappeared at the door, the room fell silent. Lily looked around, and finally, her gaze settled on one place. It was Ryan. He was wearing a white t-shirt, had a crew cut, and was leaning slightly on the chair. Just then, he also looked up at her. The moment their eyes met, Lily suddenly understood what David was up to. This meddling matchmaker was secretly trying to play Cupid again. However, even if he was trying to play matchmaker, he should have told her in advance. She really thought she was going to accompany him to some important event and had dressed up so formally. A white daily-style little evening dress, high heels, her hair just curled with a hair curler, and a carefully done makeup. Compared with these casually dressed young guys in their 20s, she looked like a pretentious little fairy. Lily stood at the door, not knowing whether to go in or leave. Fortunately, just when she was hesitating, Ryan came over to rescue her. He got up and walked in front of her, sized her up from head to toe, and said jokingly, "Take your seat, princess." On a normal day, Lily might have secretly thought it was cheesy. But Ryan's eyes were really beautiful. They were just like those of the character she had been crazy about when she was binge-watching a drama. His affectionate and gentle eyes. He didn't even need to do much, just a quiet look at her, and she couldn't say no. It wasn't until she sat down behind Ryan that Lily realized later that the seat beside Ryan had been empty all along. She stole a glance at him and secretly guessed in her heart. Could it be that he originally knew she was coming? However, she quickly dismissed this guess because, after she and Ryan sat down together, the whooping and cheering in the room got louder and louder. The guy sitting beside Ryan said with a smile, "I knew it. This case has been going on for a week. Why did the higher-ups suddenly arrange a celebration dinner today and require us young guys to have a private room?" The others also echoed. However, the looks they gave Lily and Ryan were quite strange. Lily guessed that in their eyes, she probably showed up in full regalia to chase Ryan. Just thinking about it gave her a headache. Lily sat at the table, tightly clutching the corner of her skirt, and suddenly remembered what had happened last night. No wonder some of the people at the table looked familiar. It turned out that the guys who had gone with Ryan yesterday were all policemen. According to David, they all graduated from the same police academy and were recruited into the police station this year. There was one guy who talked a lot, and Lily had a deeper impression of him. He happened to be sitting next to her. He sized her up and leaned over to whisper to her, "Girl, you're dressing the wrong way." Lily was stunned. "What do you mean by wrong?" He gave a teasing smile. "You don't know. Our boss likes sexy girls. Next time, wear a miniskirt. I guarantee our boss will be crazy about you." Crazy about her? What kind of wild talk was this? Lily looked helpless. Just as she was about to explain that she didn't dress like this because of Ryan, an arm suddenly reached out from behind her, and then a finger flicked hard on the guy's forehead. Immediately afterwards, Ryan's voice came from beside her ear. "What nonsense. Don't lead the little girl astray." I instinctively turned to look at him, but Ryan had leaned in close, his jaw stopping right beside my ear. I turned abruptly without warning, and the corner of my lips brushed against the side of his cheek. If it had been just a little off, I might have kissed him. Silence hung for a few seconds, then deafening cheers erupted. My body stiffened completely, frozen in that position until Ryan smiled and slowly straightened up. Bang! Bang! He tapped the table, swept a serious look around, and declared sternly, "All right, order your food, have your drinks, what's all the cheering about?" But while he spoke all seriously, from where I sat, I could just see his ears flushing red. I stared blankly at his reddened ears for a moment, then couldn't help but laugh. Look at him, calling me Lily again and again, but he's no less innocent himself, getting flushed just from an accidental touch. For some reason, seeing this upright guy sitting stiffly in front of me, I suddenly felt that heartbreak wasn't such a big deal after all. Thankfully, the meal wasn't as awkward as I'd feared. We were all young people around the same age, no generation gap, easy to connect. Hanging out, I realized these casually dressed guys were actually ordinary, passionate youths, joking and laughing around the table. Among them was a handsome young man with clear features who had a couple of drinks and suddenly covered his face crying. Everyone was startled, and after some questioning, we learned he'd been dumped, and worse, his ex-girlfriend had cheated on him. I rested my chin on my hand, eyebrow raised upon hearing that. It sounded just like my own real-life experience. Out of sympathy, I couldn't help but glance at him twice, but suddenly my view was blocked by a bottle of juice. Following the hand holding the juice upward, I saw Ryan. He held a large bottle of blueberry juice and said seriously, "Don't keep staring, he's drowning his sorrows over a breakup, Lily should have some juice instead." I argued without thinking, blurting out, "Who hasn't had a breakup?" At those words, Ryan paused for a second, then looked at me thoughtfully. "So that scene last night, you drinking like that, was because of a breakup?" My face flushed as I suddenly remembered puking on him in public the night before, and I pressed my lips shut, saying nothing more. Ryan poured a cup of juice and set it before me, rubbing the tip of his nose before finally blurting out after a pause, "Lily, happy breakup." I was stunned for a while, then suddenly laughed. Taking the cup, I lowered my head and sipped the juice, the sweetness spreading from my tongue to my heart. Well, juice definitely tastes better than alcohol. At the table, the young officers drank merrily, especially the guy who'd been cheated on. At first, he sobbed uncontrollably, tears and snot all over, but as the alcohol kicked in, he wiped his nose and suddenly threw an arm around the slim, handsome fellow beside him, slurring his words, "Bro, I've seen it all through, who needs girlfriends? From now on, I'm not sticking with one gender anymore." My hand froze mid-air holding my cup, eyes sparkling as I watched from across the table. As a dedicated fan of boy love, I sensed something suggestive in that handsome young man's words. And indeed, the neat-featured officer he'd wrapped his arm around seemed to have had some drinks too, face flushed red. Everyone at the table cheered and joked, no one taking it seriously, but I had a feeling the look in that guy's eyes held some promise. Lost in the scene, my empty cup was suddenly filled with milk. Beside my ear, Ryan's voice chimed in again, "Don't get distracted by the drama, have some milk." That would have been fine, and I was about to thank him when he added, "Milk's good for the brain." Milk for the brain? That felt a bit insulting. I spun the lazy Susan, picked up a piece of lamb, and tossed it into his bowl. "Eat more meat to build yourself up, then you might be able to carry girls someday." Ryan raised an eyebrow and actually took a bite of the meat, then explained deadpan, "Actually, I can lift a whole cow." I nodded back, and I'm great at remembering phone numbers. After an awkward pause, we fell silent by unspoken agreement. Meanwhile, someone at the table urged Ryan to drink, but he waved it off lightly. "You go ahead," he said, glancing briefly at me before turning away as if by accident. "I've got another assignment coming up." "Mission?" A buddy who had drunk a bit too much slurred, "There haven't been any cases recently." "Ryan, what mission do you have at this late hour?" Ryan didn't say a word. A guy beside him quickly stuffed a piece of mutton into his mouth and joked, "Is this even a question? The boss has an important mission. He's going to send Lily home later." "What little princess?" "She's the boss's good sister." Everyone started joking about me and Ryan. Although they meant no harm, I still blushed furiously. I tightly pursed my lips and quickly glanced at Ryan. Goodness. He was sitting upright, with no expression on his face, but his ears were bright red. Maybe sensing my gaze, Ryan frowned and cleared his throat. "All right, drink up quickly. If anyone has too much energy to spare, go do 50 push-ups over there." Once the captain spoke, everyone instantly quieted down and silently poured wine and ate. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone relaxed, I quickly glanced at Ryan again and found that he scanned the room and then subtly let out a sigh of relief. A few minutes later, Ryan picked up his glass and took a sip of juice. Suddenly, he leaned over and asked, "You don't have a boyfriend now, do you?" I was stunned for a moment, and my heart suddenly started beating a bit faster. "No." I originally wanted to ask him the same question, but the words got stuck in my throat and I swallowed them back. I didn't ask, but Ryan answered on his own. Holding the juice, he lowered his voice and said, "Coincidentally, neither do I." I raised my eyebrows. "You don't have a boyfriend either?" "I don't have a girlfriend." "What's going on in that little head of yours?" This conversation was a bit, but it was still quite normal. Apart from a blushing face and a racing heart, I didn't think much of it until, while Ryan was talking, I suddenly noticed that the private room was completely silent, and only Ryan's voice could be heard, "Little girl, then you." Before he could finish the second half of the sentence, I suddenly tugged at his sleeve. Ryan was stunned for a moment and then quickly realized what was going on. All the guys in the room were quietly watching us, each biting their chopsticks and eavesdropping on our conversation with mischievous smiles. I blushed deeply and quickly stood up. "I'm going to the restroom." Without waiting for Ryan to react, I trotted out of the private room. I huddled in the restroom for a long time. I wanted to wash my face with cold water but was afraid of ruining my makeup. Finally, I leaned against the window and let the cold wind blow on me for a while to calm down before slowly going back. As a result, when I opened the door of the private room, the scene inside really scared me. The table was empty, and only Ryan was sitting there. On the open space beside it, there were 7 or 8 guys lying on the ground, huffing and puffing as they did push-ups. I'd never seen such a sight before. Standing at the door, I didn't know what to do, neither going in nor going out. Ryan looked up at me and waved. "Little girl, come here." I didn't move because there was really no place to step. There were a bunch of guys doing push-ups on the ground in between. Suddenly, the guy closest to me looked up at me and whispered, "Sister-in-law, please plead for us. We've all drunk, and if we keep doing this, we'll throw up." I blushed and whispered in denial, "I'm not your sister-in-law." The guy's face fell. "That doesn't matter, okay. All right." I tentatively said to Ryan, "How about stop making them do it?" To my surprise, Ryan didn't hesitate at all. As soon as I finished speaking, he waved to them. Come back. That wasn't all. These guys got up from the ground and all smiled and thanked me. Thank you, sister-in-law. Sister-in-law is so nice. Is this what it feels like to be the boss's woman in the movies? In the second half, everyone had drunk enough. They chatted and laughed, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. After the gathering ended, Ryan was very responsible and hailed a taxi for everyone. After settling everyone down, he turned to look at me. At the end of summer and the beginning of autumn, it was still a bit cold at night. I was wearing a little dress and hugging my arms, waiting for him. He was stunned for a moment, then rubbed his temples in annoyance, quickly took off his coat, walked over quickly, and put it on my shoulders. Sorry, I didn't notice just now. Maybe out of apology, he touched his nose a bit awkwardly while speaking. Lily's input action was actually a bit cute. It's okay, I tightened my coat and pretended to be reserved. Then I'll go back. I'll see you off, Ryan said, pointing to a row of cars parked beside him and smiling. If David knew I let his precious daughter walk back alone in the middle of the night, he'd probably tear me apart tomorrow. He wouldn't he? I wrinkled my nose and said sourly. You don't know. The person he praises the most at home every day is you. Whenever he mentions you, he says you're good in every way. He wishes I could find someone for him according to your standards. At this point, I suddenly stopped. I abruptly shut up and held back the last two words son-in-law. I secretly sighed and scolded myself in my heart. I was really a big mouth and would say anything when chatting. Ryan walked side by side with me. Seeing me suddenly stop talking, he turned to look at me. Find what? This guy looked at me with a smile, asking knowingly. I pursed my lips and changed the subject. Where did you park your car? Here, Ryan casually pointed to one side. I looked in the direction he pointed and was stunned. Goodness, a Maybach? I stared blankly at it for a couple of seconds and then turned to look at him. Did you embezzle money? Ryan was both amused and annoyed. He reached out and ruffled my hair, the action very natural. What are you thinking about? Then he withdrew his hand, led me around the Maybach, and then pointed to an electric bike parked not far behind the car. I breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it wasn't a Maybach. Otherwise, I'd really be worried that I couldn't match him. My dad, David, is an old-fashioned person. He always believes in the honest and upright work style in his bones. Although he has a certain position, he never accepts gifts. I've heard that he's often targeted and suppressed because of this. Our family isn't in difficult circumstances, but we really don't have much money. We're at most an ordinary middle-class family. Ryan rummaged in his pocket, took out an electric bike key and pressed it. Beep, beep. The electric bike beeped and unlocked. He skillfully straddled it, picked up the two helmets hanging on the bike, and handed one to me. Let's go. I'll take you home. I obediently sat on it. Since I was wearing a skirt, I could only sit sideways behind him. With nowhere to hold on, I could only tightly grip the seat. After putting on the helmet, Ryan looked back at me and let out a low laugh. If you're scared, you can grab my clothes. Okay, I replied and then grabbed the corner of his clothes. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but the corner of his clothes seemed to be warm, carrying his body heat. Thinking like this, I seemed to blush a little. Along the way, I wanted to strike up a conversation several times, but every time the words reached my lips, I swallowed them back again. I didn't know how to say it or what to say. Halfway through the journey, a small accident happened. When Ryan was riding along the roadside, a little boy suddenly rushed out from the sidewalk on one side. He was about 5 or 6 years old. Without even looking at the cars on the road, he just buried his head and ran over. Fortunately, Ryan reacted quickly and made an emergency stop. Due to inertia, I slammed into his back hard. My hand that was originally holding the corner of his clothes changed to hugging him. I guarantee that this action was really a subconscious reaction and I definitely didn't mean to take advantage of him. However, I hesitated for a moment and didn't let go. It wasn't until Ryan started moving again that I pretended to just notice and let out a fake exclamation, then slowly tried to withdraw my hand. But Ryan's voice came from the front, carried by the wind and seemingly with a hint of a smile. "Just hold on. It's safer." "Oh," I replied. Just as I was about to make a false excuse, I heard Ryan speak again. "Don't worry. I won't tell others that you're taking advantage of me." I don't know if it was an illusion, but I always felt that the way back seemed to become extremely long. I originally thought it was just my imagination until a young man who was out for a night run easily overtook us. It was only then that I, who was always careless, realized how slowly Ryan was riding the bike. Ryan himself also seemed to realize it. He took one hand off the handlebar to touch his nose and explained in a low voice. "Well, the bike is out of power, so it's slow." Okay. However, even though Ryan was riding his bike slowly, I still didn't let go. I couldn't help but marvel at Ryan's physique. It was incredibly toned. Even through his shirt, I could clearly feel the muscles on his lower abdomen. Sitting in front, Ryan had no idea that for most of the ride, my face was flushed. After graduating from college, I once thought my youth had ended with the conclusion of my student life. But it turned out that when I meet a boy I'm attracted to, I still get flustered and anxious. Now that I look back, my nearly year-long first love seems rather ridiculous. He was the one who approached me first. We were high school classmates for 3 years, but it wasn't until my senior year during my internship that he relentlessly pursued me and even got several old classmates involved to play matchmaker. He knew from the start that I didn't have feelings for him, yet he earnestly told me he didn't care. He said to give him some time, and I was sure to fall for him. Gradually, he won me over, and I decided to give him a chance. We dated for nearly a year. Honestly, I never really felt that spark of attraction, but I did my duty as a girlfriend should. We always split the bill when going out to eat. Whenever he gave me a gift, I returned something better. When he fell ill, I rushed back to my hometown to accompany him for late-night shots. In short, during our relationship, I believed I never wronged him. Yet it all ended with the awkward scene of catching him in bed with someone else. The only silver lining is that we never crossed that line physically. A week after we became official, he rushed to my city and booked a room at a hotel near my school, hinting at his intentions. I'm not stupid, just a bit slow when it comes to matters of the heart, so I avoided meeting him and rejected his crude proposal altogether. "Lily?" I was lost in memories when Ryan's voice suddenly snapped me out of it. I jolted, took a moment to come to my senses, and looked up at him to see Ryan turn his head toward me and tilt it slightly. "We're here," he said. I turned and saw that, yes, we were home, Jinjiang Garden. I pressed my lips together and hurried off the bike, but as I withdrew my arm from around his waist, I couldn't resist giving his abs a quick squeeze. The mood turned awkward. Ryan looked down at me, the corner of his mouth quirking slightly, so I forced a light laugh and played it cool by complimenting him. "Nice abs." "Thanks for the compliment," he replied calmly, though his eyes held a hint of amusement. I waved goodbye but couldn't help asking, "Do you smile a lot?" Guys who smile easily seem rare. Ryan paused, then shook his head. "Not really." But, he drew out the word, hesitated, then added, "It depends on who I'm with." His words inevitably made me overthink. I pressed my lips again, and amid the bustling street noise, I distinctly heard my own heartbeat, thump thump. Not daring to stay with him any longer, I waved quickly, muttered a goodbye, and rushed into the complex. For the first time in my life, I realized that things like quickened breath and a blank mind around the opposite sex weren't just found in novels and TV shows. I sprinted in my small heels all the way to the building and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Touching my face, it still felt warm. That night, I slept exceptionally well. The next morning, after getting up and washing, I resumed my job hunt. I'd been back home for less than a month and still hadn't landed a job. My traditionally stubborn dad, David, wanted to pull strings for a better position, but I refused. Probably influenced by him since childhood, I've always been averse to that kind of favoritism. After resting at home for 2 weeks, I'd recently started looking for work and sending out resumes. At lunch, my old classmate Sophia suddenly called. "Lily," she said, "we've got a class reunion tonight. Wanna come?" Instinctively, I wanted to say no, simply because I didn't want to see the guy who cheated on me. But before I could refuse, Sophia blurted out, "Relax, Kevin won't be there." Kevin was the ex-boyfriend who'd betrayed me. Sophia kept coaxing me, and after some hesitation, I agreed. Fine, text me the time and place. Got it, see you then. After hanging up, I went back to my tasks and soon received Sophia's reunion details via text. Strangely enough, the venue was conveniently located across the street from the police station where Ryan works. I secretly thought that after the gathering, I could use being tipsy as an excuse to go see Ryan for a bit. At dinner yesterday, I heard from his group of friends that Ryan works out at the gym across the street every night after work. What a coincidence, the gym and the restaurant for our class reunion are both in the same mall. Since I'd made up my mind to bump into him, I changed clothes in advance and dressed up carefully. I didn't want to be that overly dramatic person from yesterday. Today, I was a sweet girl in a white dress with long black hair and subtle nude makeup that played up my natural look. I guess guys like Ryan, who seem upright but actually blush easily at the ears, would be into that type. But when I arrived at the hotel for the reunion dinner that evening, I realized I wasn't in the mood to run into Ryan at all, because Kevin had shown up. And he didn't come alone, he brought his new girlfriend. Due to traffic, I was a bit late. As soon as I walked into the private room, I spotted Kevin sitting right across from the entrance and the familiar-looking girl in his arms. Wasn't this humiliating? If he'd brought any other girl, I wouldn't have cared, but the last time I caught them cheating in bed, things had gotten super awkward. I couldn't understand how these two could be so shameless as to show up together at our class reunion. The noisy room suddenly went silent when I appeared, with almost everyone's eyes darting back and forth among the three of us. I stood at the doorway, unsure whether to leave or walk in. After hesitating for a few seconds, I broke the awkwardness first, smiled, and walked in pretending everything was fine. Sorry, traffic got me here late, I said, sitting down in the empty seat next to Sophia. However, Sophia's expression didn't look good, and it wasn't just her, I could sense something off in the way my old classmates were staring at me. I frowned, glanced down at my outfit, found nothing wrong, and decided to brush it off. Later on, after everyone had a few drinks, Kevin's girlfriend went out to the restroom and called Kevin along to keep her company. At that moment, Ethan, who was sitting 2 seats down from me, had gotten quite drunk and suddenly slurred at me, "Lily, I'm telling you, you ought to offer Kevin a toast." I was stunned and almost doubted my ears. Me offer him a toast? Why should I? The room fell dead silent as everyone leaned on their chins to watch the drama. Sophia deliberately stepped in to smooth things over, slapping the table and saying, "Ethan, you've had too much to drink. Come on, let's all raise our glasses together." As soon as she spoke, others chimed in to try and cover up the topic, but Ethan persisted. "Lily, you know how hard Kevin worked to chase you back then. Gulp. If you didn't like him, you could have broken up peacefully instead of cheating on him." Me, cheat on Kevin? After the shock wore off, I looked up at him. "Did Kevin tell you that?" Ethan's face was flushed red from the alcohol, and despite people trying to calm him down, he slurred out, When you weren't here earlier, Kevin told all of us." He glanced around the table. We all heard it. The entire group sat in awkward silence, the atmosphere unbearably tense. After a pause, someone else tried to downplay it. "Lily, don't listen to Ethan's nonsense, he's drunk and talking crap." But the looks on everyone's faces gave them away. Ethan was right, Kevin and his girlfriend must have made up some story before I arrived. By coincidence, the room was quiet when the door suddenly opened, and Kevin walked in arm with his girlfriend. I stood up, walked over, and stopped right in front of them. Kevin looked at me, frowned instinctively, and seemed nervous based on what I knew about him. "Let's talk," I said, folding my arms as I watched him. "I hear you've been spreading rumors everywhere that I cheated." Kevin frowned tighter, lips pressed shut in silence. While he kept quiet, his girlfriend refused to let it go. "What, is it wrong?" "Lily, Kevin found out you cheated before you broke up. He just didn't say anything to spare you the embarrassment." I had to laugh at her. To quote a classic line, I'd never seen anyone so shameless. Here they were, a cheating couple, brazenly showing up at the reunion and even turning the tables to pin the blame on me. I started arguing with Kevin's girlfriend. Before long, Kevin got all protective and quickly sided with his girlfriend. They even shoved me during the fight. As we pushed and pulled, Kevin held me back tightly while his girlfriend slapped me hard across the face. The scene turned chaotic. Probably fueled by alcohol and rage, I grabbed a nearby liquor bottle and smashed it hard against Kevin's head. With a dull thud, the bottle shattered instantly. Amid everyone's screams, blood streamed down Kevin's forehead, shockingly vivid. My little girlfriend screamed and then called the police. What should have been a pleasant class reunion turned into a chaotic brawl because of us three. To top it off, just 10 minutes later, we were hauled off to the police station down the street. At the station entrance, Ryan, who had changed into casual clothes and was about to clock out, locked eyes with me. I quickly looked away in embarrassment. The mediation process went smoothly enough. That cheating couple managed to squeeze a bit of money from me for medical expenses, but they didn't get away unscathed. As they were about to leave the station, Ryan suddenly called out Kevin. Giving him a once-over, Ryan looked like he'd solved a puzzle. I knew you looked familiar. Weren't you one of the guys I busted a while back for solicitation? Kevin froze, his face flushing with embarrassment as he loudly insisted it was a case of mistaken identity, then stormed out without a backward glance. His little girlfriend just stood there in shock for a few seconds before stomping her foot in frustration and chasing after him. Ryan watched with a satisfied expression, probably thinking he'd gotten under their skin. But he didn't realize that his comment actually got under mine instead. A while back. That was before Kevin and I had even broken up. So it seemed Kevin wasn't just cheating but, wait, how many times had I been betrayed? Just thinking about it made me feel sick. Inside the station, Ryan and I stared at each other in silence for a moment before he suddenly grinned. Well now, girl, he said, shaking his head as he looked at me, you sure pack a punch when you fight. I bit my lip, hesitated briefly, but decided to explain anyway. He was my ex-boyfriend, and the one next to him was the other woman. I'm the one who caught them together in bed back then. Yet today at the reunion, they started spreading rumors that I was the one who cheated. Ryan didn't respond. After a long pause, he cursed under his breath before saying, next time you see him, give me a call. Why? Out of nowhere, he pulled out a bottle of juice and tossed it to me, replying coolly, that kind of thing isn't for girls to handle. I took the bottle and sipped, slowly realizing what he meant. He was telling me that if I ran into Kevin again, he'd go and rough him up for me. Seriously, he put it so subtly. But strangely, hearing that actually made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. I opened the juice for another sip. Yeah, it must be that the juice is too sweet. Just as I was swallowing, someone came downstairs, a balding guy with a beer belly, and a familiar face at that. David! David looked up at me, about to say something when his gaze landed on Ryan beside me, instantly lighting up with relief. He shuffled over, barely acknowledging me, and instead addressed Ryan. Ryan, something's come up for me tonight. Could you take Lily out to dinner for me? Ryan glanced at me with a smile. Of course, no problem at all. David nodded, clasped his hands behind his back, and walked off, humming a little tune, probably in a good mood. Come on, Ryan said, looking down at me. What do you want to eat tonight? I held onto the juice bottle. Your treat? Ryan met my gaze with amusement. If you're offering to pay, I won't object. No way. After considering my options, I settled on a nearby hot pot place. I remember hearing that if you like someone, you should take them for hot pot, though I can't recall why, but that didn't matter. What did matter was that I realized I might actually like Ryan. I even thought about confessing during dinner, but after turning it over in my mind, I decided against it. Ryan seems surprisingly innocent about love, which doesn't match his tough guy look, and I was afraid rushing things might scare him off. But the dinner turned out way more pleasant than I expected. It's worth mentioning that, based on his build and appearance, Ryan comes off as a bit of a rogue hard ass, but he's actually anything but macho. He's total gentleman material. During the meal, he poured drinks for me, carefully cooked foods that overcook easily like duck intestines and tripe, fetched wet wipes and an apron for me, and even when I held my hair back with one hand to eat, he pulled out a hair tie from somewhere and put my hair up. Honestly, it was incredibly attentive. I couldn't help but overthink. At the meal, my mind was full of one possibility. Does he like me too? But upon closer thought, it seems unlikely. After all, who would be interested in a drunk who vomited all over themselves right after meeting? What's more, in terms of looks alone, I probably can't match up to Ryan. He has well-defined features and is famously handsome at the police station. At best, I'm fair-looking, with cuteness being what I get complimented on most. I figured Ryan's gentlemanly gestures must be just because I'm David's daughter. Thinking this, I pushed down those gradually swirling little thoughts. After the meal ended, Ryan rode his little electric scooter to send me home. On the way, I still clung tightly to the corner of his shirt, feeling like I wanted to say something, but ended up saying nothing. This time, Ryan dropped me off downstairs. I let go of his shirt, got off the scooter, took off the helmet, and handed it back to him. "I'll head home then." "Okay. Ride slow on your way back." After that brief exchange, I waved, turned to go home, and after thinking all evening, I'd somewhat let go. Anyway, neither of us is married or has a boyfriend or girlfriend now, so there's plenty of time to slowly build a relationship. No rush. However, just 2 steps out, Ryan's voice came from behind. "Lily." "HM?" I turned to look and saw him leaning halfway against the scooter, lips pursed, watching me. Was it a trick of the streetlight, or did his ears seem a bit flushed? I started overthinking again. Was he planning to confess? With that thought, my heart couldn't help racing. Yet, after a long silence, he finally blurted out, "You still owe me money." The atmosphere instantly turned awkward. I felt like a deadbeat debtor, my face flushing red immediately. "I thought David had paid you back already." I'll transfer it to you on WeChat in a bit." After saying that, I didn't dare linger, turning and running upstairs. Back home, I found David alone eating dinner in the living room. The lights were off, only the TV on. He sat before the sofa, a plate of cooked frozen dumplings on the coffee table. "Lily?" Hearing the door open, David turned while biting a dumpling and looked over. "Why are you back so early?" I glanced at the clock on the wall and said weakly, "Not early, it's almost 10. Yet, as I reached my room door, David's voice came from behind. Is that Ryan downstairs?" I paused, then replied, "Probably, he might be doing some accounting." "Accounting?" David muttered, clearly confused, but before he could ask more, I opened the door and ducked into my room. Back in my room, I estimated and transferred him $600. That meal couldn't have cost more than $200, it was a cheap little diner, and I hadn't ordered many dishes, mostly just drinks. As for Ryan's clothes, he dresses low-key usually, and his clothes show no obvious brands, so that outfit probably wasn't expensive. $600 total should be enough, right? But the transfer was refunded half a minute after I sent it. "Ryan, I was just joking." It came with an awkward emoji. I tried twice more, but both were refunded, along with a message, "I was really joking, David had given it to me ages ago." "Really?" "Yeah." I finally gave up, but my little thoughts about getting closer to Ryan were pressed down again. In my room, I paced irritably twice before thinking, deflated, that I'd better take it slow. What's there to be afraid of? There will be plenty of time anyway. But I never got to experience that plenty of time. In less than a month, I suddenly received a call from Ryan's subordinate. "Sis, get to the hospital now. The boss was injured on duty and is in emergency surgery." I froze for 2 seconds, nearly dropping my phone. Coming back to my senses, I asked for the address and rushed over without even taking time off work. In the taxi, I clutched my phone tightly, my mind in turmoil. Over this past month, things hadn't progressed much between Ryan and me. He treated me well, and there were never other girls around him, yet he hesitated to take that final step. I've always been insecure. Without a clear statement from him, I couldn't confirm his feelings. We grew closer but never officially got together. Every time I visited him at the station, his young colleagues would call me sis. He'd just smile, never confirming nor denying it. 2 weeks ago, I landed a great job with good pay and benefits, crucially located across the street from the police station. I'd really pulled out all the stops to spend more time with Ryan. At the hospital, too impatient to wait for the elevator, I raced up the stairs. As I entered the hallway, I saw his subordinates standing or sitting outside the operating room. "Sis." Their faces were grim as they greeted me in hushed tones. Too distracted to correct the title, I grabbed the nearest guy. "How's Ryan?" He stared at me for a second, sighed, shook his head, and walked away to squat in the corner. My stomach dropped, panic surging as worst-case scenarios flooded my mind. "No, how's your boss really doing?" I shouted toward the slender young man farthest away, the quiet one who never lied. Suddenly addressed, Noah froze. After a heavy silence, he looked up. His eyes were bloodshot before a single tear rolled down. I was utterly terrified. With no updates from the operating room, I paced the hallway, desperate for news. They'd only say Ryan was injured on duty, refusing to specify the injuries or severity. If pressed, they'd just sigh and shake their heads. I used to think waiting was dull, only now did I realize it's the most agonizing thing in the world. Just as I neared breaking point, the operating room doors swung open. The doctor removed his mask while walking out. I scrambled up from where I'd been crouching but stumbled as my legs gave out. Noah caught me before I fell. By the time I steadied myself, the others had already swarmed the doctor. Their frantic questions drowned out his words. When my legs finally cooperated, I rushed forward, only to see Ryan on the gurney as the medical team wheeled him out. His eyes were shut, his face ghostly pale under the lights. My last shred of hope vanished, leaving my mind blank. Without thinking, I pushed through the crowd. "Ryan!" I choked out, grabbing his limp hand. Tears spilled without warning. "Wake up! We haven't even gotten together yet. You can't do this." He showed no reaction. I wept harder. "You can't walk away from responsibility. You kissed me that day, how could you not be with me?" Gasps rose behind me. It was true. Something unexpected had happened during our hot pot dinner. A complete accident. As he moved to tie my hair, Ryan pulled too hard. When I turned to complain, he was leaning close, my lips lightly brushed against his. When I snapped back to reality, laughter broke out nearby. "Sis, wanna bet he'll wake up if you kiss him again right now?" I wiped my tears. This isn't the time for jokes. But just then, Ryan's eyes flew open. He gazed up at me, a faint smile curving his lips, eyes crinkling with amusement. They weren't kidding. Dumbstruck, I watched as he whispered, "Come closer. I'll tell you a secret." My mind went empty again, heart lurching between fear and relief. Instinctively, I leaned down as he asked. However, when I leaned in close to his ear, Ryan unexpectedly turned his head and kissed me on the lips. A warm sensation spread across my lips, freezing me in place as I stared blankly at his face, mere inches away. Behind us, the suppressed cheers of the young men echoed. The kiss lasted only a few seconds before being interrupted by the doctor. The doctor, a man in his 40s, waved his hand helplessly and said, "All right, it's obvious he has a broken leg. Anyone who doesn't know would think you're acting out some romantic drama." A wave of hushed laughter rippled down the corridor. I snapped out of it and finally processed what the doctor had just said, a broken leg. "Ryan!" I shouted, running alongside the gurney and glaring at him. "Why were you pretending to be unconscious with a broken leg?" Ryan smiled wryly. "I just had surgery on my calf, and the doctor wouldn't let me use a wheelchair. He insisted I lie on this gurney. It was under local anesthesia, and it didn't hurt much afterward, so I was a bit tired and dozed off for a bit." Fine. And the extremely pale complexion Ryan had earlier? It was really just the lighting. At least now, lying on the gurney, he looked perfectly rosy. Inside the hospital room, the attending doctor gave a few instructions and left, and the skilled actors among Ryan's subordinates tactfully slipped away too. The empty room held only Ryan and me. He lay on the hospital bed while I sat beside it, the atmosphere awkward yet tinged with an intimacy. Such a mess. Recalling how I had acted, I felt mortified. Now everyone knew I liked Ryan. Honestly, I'd imagined being with Ryan before, but I never dreamed I'd be the one to initiate things. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, and I couldn't help turning to look at him. But the moment I turned, I met his smiling eyes unexpectedly. The simmering anger in my chest vanished instantly. Ryan gazed at me with a soft smile, tilting his head slightly before asking quietly after a few seconds, "Lily, I have a question for you." "What is it?" I touched my burning hot face. "Do you have a boyfriend?" I shot him a glare. "You're just stating the obvious." He laughed, then took my hand. "So, what do you think of me?" I froze for 2 seconds, my face growing hotter. I glanced at him quickly. Inside, I was desperate to be together right then, but I still refused to admit it out loud. I pouted and said deliberately, "You're just okay." Ryan remained smiling as he held my hand, his breathing seeming to quicken. Then, "Could you settle for me and be with me?" After saying this, Ryan looked steadily into my eyes. I'm not usually shy, but around Ryan, I always blush and my heart races. I was already incredibly nervous, but when my eyes shifted, they landed on Ryan's ear. Turns out, this guy who seemed so composed was actually nervous too. I couldn't help laughing as I leaned closer to him, but I also noticed he instinctively avoided my gaze. "Ryan, are you blushing? Your ears are all red." "I'm nervous." I propped myself up on the bed, leaning over him. "Why are you nervous? You didn't do anything wrong." He swallowed hard, his eyes scanning my face before he murmured softly, "I've already done the wrong thing in my head." I paused for 2 seconds before it slowly dawned on me. Once I understood what he meant, my face flushed crimson. "Ryan!" I glared at him, red-faced. But Ryan just chuckled softly, then reached out and pinched my cheek. "Lily, be my girlfriend." The room fell silent. Outside, a gentle breeze stirred, rustling the curtains by the window and stirring my heart too. I let out a soft laugh and could clearly feel that my earlobes were gradually turning red. Sure. Epilogue, fate is always so mysterious. When I had been together with Ryan for a year, we got engaged. Both David and Ryan's dad didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so there was no grand celebration for the engagement. Instead, the two families just got together for a meal. Speaking of which, there was a story between David and Ryan's dad. It wasn't the cliché story of them competing for a woman when they were young. On the contrary, when they were young, Ryan's dad competed with other women for David. That's right. His dad and David were alumni back then and very close brothers. However, their brotherly relationship broke down because of Ryan's dad's confession after getting drunk. David had never mentioned these things to me. It was all told to me by Ryan. He said that back then, after getting drunk, Ryan's dad confessed his feelings and forcefully kissed David. David, a straight man, was shocked and angry. In a fit of rage, he quarreled with Ryan's dad. Then, the two brothers completely fell out. It wasn't until many years later when they met again. The past disputes had long been forgotten. They shook hands and made up. Moreover, they even discussed how to matchmake their children, which was me and Ryan. However, they didn't expect that before they could play matchmaker, Ryan and I had already met by chance. Fate was truly wonderful. That night, almost everyone had drunk some alcohol, and Ryan had drunk a lot. When the gathering was over, Ryan's dad and David walked with their arms around each other's shoulders, looking like good old friends. "David, your wife has been gone for so many years. It's time for you to find a partner." David gave him a sidelong glance, his breath reeking of alcohol. "At my age, who can I find?" "You?" Ryan's dad was stunned for a moment, then touched his forehead and laughed. "What you said." The two of them shook their heads, not even looking at Ryan and me, and walked away chatting shoulder to shoulder. Ryan and I looked at each other and suddenly felt a bit worried. "Ryan, do you think we won't become step-siblings, will we?" Ryan had drunk, and his reaction seemed a bit slower than usual. After a few seconds, he suddenly laughed and gently poked me on the forehead. "What are you thinking about?" I wanted to say something else, but Ryan suddenly leaned over and hugged me. I don't know why, but this man over 180 centimeters tall seemed a bit cute after drinking. He hugged me, and his chin gently rubbed against my neck. "Little girl," he said softly, his voice low and gentle. "Actually, I'm not a person who believes in love at first sight. I always think the saying love at first sight is just lust at first sight is quite right." But he gently kissed the back of my ear, which made me a little itchy. "When I saw you at the entrance of the small restaurant that day, my heart started beating faster out of the blue. I'm guilty. I actually had feelings for a drunk little girl." I listened quietly, my heart already melting, but I still snorted. "Then how are you going to atone for your sin?" Ryan gave a soft laugh, his tone a bit teasing. "How about atoning for it in bed tonight?" I punched him in the chest. Ryan! He laughed softly and hugged me tighter. His voice came to my ear with the wind. Little girl, thank you. Thank me for what? Thank you for calling me that day.